start my recording here so we can get that going for our people who will have missed the session. We will send this recording out as soon as possible. I will try to get it out to y'all tomorrow. It does take a really long time to process, so sometimes I get delayed, but we'll get this out to you so you can rewatch it later. Is anybody cooking along with us tonight? Lisa and Lena, awesome. All right, great. Well, feel free to check in at any point. If you have a burning question, if we're going too fast or something, feel free to let us know. But Chef Katie does a good job of making sure that everyone can sort of follow along. Tonight's class is all about seafood, and we're doing some really cool light preparations for you, and I hope you all enjoy it. I'm going to turn it over to Chef Katie now. One thing to note before I do that, though, if I'm going to spotlight her video, she's got two different cameras here. We've got her cutting board as well as her main screen. Once I spotlight those, I believe you want to have your view set to speaker to be able to see that permanently. And I'm going to do this right now. We're going to, oops, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh, I just already messed it up. Here we go. All right, so we should have the side-by-side spotlight of Chef Katie's beautiful face and her beautiful kitchen setup there. So hopefully y'all can see that. If you're on speaker view, you will be able to see that throughout this class. And all right, I'm going to turn it over to Chef Katie.
All right, hi. I did just turn my oven on. So if you are cooking with us and want to go ahead and turn your oven, I wanted to wait till the last possible minute because we've kind of turned a corner here in New Orleans and it's getting quite warm outside. And I'm just going to get started. I'm going to start with the whitefish in papillote. And the great thing about this dish is that a lot of the preparation for it can be done 1 to 2 days in advance if you're that type of cook, or you have are going to have people over because now you're vaccinated and we can start doing those types of things without any guilt or fear as much as we used to. But so keep in mind that the compound butter would hold for a day or two, and same with the par-cooked potatoes. So I'm going to start with the compound butter. So I have my 2 tablespoons of butter here, and I just have them in a really small bowl. It takes me a while to get used to this. Here we go. Not a very big bowl. It makes it a lot easier when it comes time to mix all of it up. I also am going to be using one of my favorite tools, which is a garlic press. I don't promote a ton of equipment because most stuff you can get done with a knife and a cutting board, but I do really love the garlic press because it means that my wooden cutting board doesn't get a stinky like garlic taste on it. So that's the first thing I'm going to get in there are my 2 cloves of garlic. In our recipe, it calls for parsley, but I did want you guys to know that you could sub a lot of fresh herbs. For that, if you wanted to, you could use thyme or basil. So don't feel like you have to use the parsley, but I am going to show you guys a trick. So I do have parsley growing in my garden, I'm pretty proud to say. So I was able to just go and pick this from my yard. It is very handy if you can keep plants alive, which I'm not the best at, but a lot of things don't give you a ton of trouble, like basil and parsley. But it means that you don't have to spend, $5 at the grocery store getting a clamshell plastic container of the parsley, and then it only calls for 2 tablespoons, and now you've got a ton of it. So all I did was I picked some of it off. I didn't pick like the whole leaf off, and I'm just gonna stack them together because what I'm gonna do is just cut them, and I'm just gonna stop when I get to where the stems is. You really just want to get the leaf. And let's see, I hope you guys can see this little technique. I'm gonna kind of roll it. This is something we call chiffonade. Traditionally it's done with basil, but you really can do it with any herb, and you just kind of roll it into this tight little package. It makes it a lot easier to cut. And remember, I've got my forefinger and my thumb pinching my knife here. And I'm going to be using this rocking motion with the tip of my knife on my cutting board, and I'm just going all the way through. And I'm just going to chiffonade. I'm not going to worry about like chopping it so fine. The way it's going to get mixed into this butter, I don't know that it needs to be finely minced. I'm just moving my fingers back as I move through that parsley there. All right, so that looks like 2 tablespoons to me. If you're new to this class, you'll know that we always give a recipe. I don't always follow it. Some things I just don't think it's that important to measure, like parsley, right? It's not salt, it's not fat. So, you know, I really think you have a fair amount of wiggle room that it's still going to taste delicious, even if you're a little under or a little over. All right, the next thing I have here is my lemon zest. So I've got this lemon. I have already washed it off, and then I have this zester, and I place my zester up against my bowl. So that way, when I grate my lemon on it, my zester isn't gonna go flying. I do use a rolling motion. So my hand is going to start like this and then twist. That way I can get from both the top to the bottom of the lemon in one full stroke. And I recommend just going slow. Can you guys see there where it's got the 2 little stripes? Zesters are not very forgiving, and it hurts when you grate your finger. And it's always a bummer when you feel like you have to throw away what you have been zesting because you grated your hand. Then a little tap, and we've got our zest in there. That is just my oven telling me it's hot. For this recipe, we did use both butter and oil. And that's because, you know, we don't want so much saturated fat in there, but, you know, the butter is what kind of holds it together. So by cutting out some of our butter and replacing it with olive oil means that we have some unsaturated fat mixed in here with our saturated fat. There's one of the things I do really love about Gold Ring is that we encourage people to not eat as much of some things, but we never have a rule like you can't ever have butter again. It's all about just having things in moderation. You know, we definitely do a lot of 50-50 kind of things. So we're doing part butter, part olive oil. It gives us a nice balance. Okay, it only said a half of a lemon. I did a whole. I like a lot of lemon. If you want to just do a half of a lemon zested, that's fine with me. I'm going to be doing something similar for the pickled shrimp. You know, Heather asks me to make recipes for these things, but the truth is when I cook at home, I don't measure everything. There's, I think, a lot of fun in being able to eyeball things and not be so stressed out that you have to measure every little teaspoon and tablespoon. And when it comes to things like mustard seeds or red pepper flakes, well, maybe that's a bad example. Let's say mustard seeds and celery seed. It's not really the end of the world if you have a little bit more or a little bit less. So I'm just grating our fresh black pepper here. We often say to taste, because there's nothing sadder than when I used to work in the kitchen with people and I would see somebody trying to grind black pepper into this little teeny tiny measurer. Black pepper is one of those things where you're allowed to have as much as you want. It's, again, salt and fat that we're mostly worried about. Okay, I think that is everything in you can see how warm it is here. I pulled this butter out like not too long ago and it's already, I feel like, I can't, there we go. There it is. It's like already like super soft and mushy. So I'm just going to mix that together really nicely. And I'm actually going to pop it in my refrigerator again. It's just going to make it a little bit easier to apply to our fish when it is a little bit firmer.
Katie, every time I have a camera set up like that, I do the same thing as you. It's almost like you have to do the opposite direction that you think you have to do.
Of what your instinct is telling you. Yes, I totally agree.
It's so awkward. And also, I would just like to state for the record that I fully support all instances of not measuring things like seasonings that aren't salt, and oil. I mean, I think when you're doing lemon, yeah, just do however much lemon you like. If you want more parsley, less parsley, go for it.
Yeah. And honestly, a grapefruit, an orange, a lime, you could really replace any citrus in this recipe, that it's not really worth running out and buying one lemon because you want to make this. Another great thing about compound butter is that it freezes really well. So if you wanted to take, and triple this recipe, you could easily do that and either put it in a small container or, roll it in like a tube. I think we've talked about cookies, how we would do that. So roll it into a tube, you can freeze it, and then you can just slice off a piece of it so that you can use it for all sorts of things. You can put it in rice, you could put it with pasta, you can cook it with fish a later date, you could cook it with chicken. So that compound butter is just a great way to impart flavor and a little bit of fat all at once.
Chef,
Okay.
Nick, one question
Yes.
for you before you move on. How long do you think it'll keep in the freezer if we freeze
In
it?
3 months, probably. Things with fat like that do eventually start to take on a flavor. But I mean, if you don't use it within 3 months, then maybe you shouldn't make compound butter and freeze it. Right? So I vote like make it and think about like in a month in the future and be like, oh yeah, I have that compound butter. Let's make something with it, right? It's about convenience at that point. I do try to cycle through my freezer and make sure that like I'm digging to the back and getting some stuff out of there that I may have forgotten about. But I think you've got a pretty good chunk of time. I think 3 months is like the most generic answer to how long does something keep in the freezer. Because the truth is, kind of depends on your freezer, right? Like some people's freezers have food in it that's like has a little bit more odor to it, or it's an older freezer and you tend to get some like frostbite on things. So I think it's kind of what you think is happening in your house. But go ahead and use that butter, honestly, it'll keep in the refrigerator for 2 weeks. So maybe don't even freeze it and lose it back there, find a recipe or, plan in the future just 1 week ahead and know that you have some compound butter to go with for that.
All right, as you're getting ready for the next thing, we have one more question, and this one's about the herbs. So if you do end up, you buy the big clamshell of the herbs, you buy the big bundle, you're like, oh shoot, I've got too many herbs. I don't know what to do with these. They're starting to look bad. What do you have any thoughts? I mean, can you freeze them or do some? I mean, what can you do?
Okay, this is what I would recommend. I know. The great thing is that I absolutely have the answer to this question, and it's chimichurri. So we have a great recipe on our website for chimichurri, which is basically like equal parts cilantro and parsley and some oil and garlic and red pepper flakes, and it makes this just intensely beautiful, flavorful sauce that is good on chicken, it's good on beef, it's good on fish. You can add a little extra vinegar to it and it becomes a salad dressing. You can spread it on toast and avocados and make a flavorful herby vinegary smear, I guess. So often when you buy parsley and cilantro, you end up with what I call a wedding bouquet of herbs. And often it's way more than what our recipe calls for. So that is one thing that I've recommended that people make. And chimichurri, you can definitely freeze in an ice cube tray and then pop it out and have it frozen in your freezer so that you can defrost as little or as much as you want when you're ready to use it. All right, hopefully that answers that question. I'm gonna do the potatoes. I did not have red potatoes. I had There we go. Idaho potatoes. So I'm going to use these Idaho potatoes. I'm going to cook them exactly the same way that I would do those red potatoes. I'm just going to cut them into these, what is it, 1/4 inch thickness, right? Again, like, don't stress yourself out about how thick these potatoes are, but I would say about like that. So maybe like a finger's width. I think the most important thing is that you just want them to be all about the same thickness. At this point, I think it's more about how they're all going to cook at the exact same time than how thick they are. Because, you know, you could cut them thinner and then you just have to cook them for less time. But the whole point of this is that this raw potato is not going to cook in our parchment paper with our fish in the time that we have, that by the time the fish is cooked. So we're just going to cook it a little bit in advance to get it soft, so that when it is in that paper with the fish, it will continue cooking. It'll soak in some of that compound butter, some of the juices, some of the wine, and it becomes, again, this more cohesive meal, because ultimately everything is going to be finished cooking at the same time. So I am just trimming off the ends. This is like some, you know, restaurant chef neuroses that, you know, I want my potatoes to all look the same. Some habits just die hard. But you know what I wanted to finish saying about preparing this in advance is that you even could prepare it a day in advance, or like the morning before. If you were going to have it for dinner, you could absolutely go all the way to the part where you wrap it in the paper and then put it all in the refrigerator. And then you can, when it's time, when you've got like 20 minutes before you want to eat dinner, you can pull it out of the refrigerator and just bake it like that. So there's something kind of nice about knowing you can get that done in advance. It means that you can enjoy your guests or your family a little bit more. Another hot tip is that when you are cooking with wine, you always want to make sure that it is wine you are willing to drink. So I don't recommend getting the $2 or $3 bottle of wine. Make sure that it's something that you are actually willing to enjoy, because most recipes do call, this one only calls for like 4 tablespoons of wine. So you're going to have a lot left over. And if you're not a wine drinker, you can freeze it in ice cube trays. I actually want to show you guys real quick while I'm waiting for my water to boil, is that I know I talk about this all the time, how I freeze tomato paste and then put it in my freezer. But so here we are with my I have yet to take it out of the actual ice tray. But I recently restocked up on my tomato paste. So that trick works great for the chimichurri, red wine, white wine, anything that you're going to add to a recipe that maybe just calls for 2 to 4 tablespoons and not necessarily like a half a cup. It's a great way to store it and know that you can just pull out those 2 cubes. They're going to defrost really quickly. So that's my hot tip for you guys. I did not salt my water because, again, we're really conscious of our salt. I did preheat my water, which is why it came to a boil so fast. And I'm just going to drop these in, and then I'm going to get my ice, because that was one thing I forgot to do ahead of time. And I'm just going to set a timer for, what does it say, 5 minutes, I think, is what we suggest.
It's pretty short.
Yeah, 5 to 8, exactly. So just a little bit. You're really just trying to get a little bit of the edge, of the rawness off of those potatoes. So I would not stress about if it's tender to a fork or if it's perfect, because really it's gonna, if you at least cook it that 5 to 8 minutes, it will definitely have plenty of time to finish cooking in the paper. Let me grab my strainer and my ice.
I actually, I'll share while Chef Katie's getting her ice. I made this recipe last week because I was trying to test that butter, make sure it was A1 perfect level. And I hadn't had this dish in a really long time because this is one that we did in some of our community classes. And as we know, we haven't done those in quite a long time. And
Yeah.
so I was like reminded about how delicious this dish is when I made it for myself for dinner.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, we did list a lot of fish because it really is very fish friendly. Like it doesn't really matter any very specific type of fish. Also, just to be like honest, so I made a dinner last week that involved fish. And so I just bought more fish than I needed. And I froze this fish and then defrosted it for this class. So just keep that in mind that, you don't necessarily have to buy that fish the day of. If you are going to buy it fresh and you're going to wait, more than 2 days to actually cook the fish, I do recommend you keep it on ice. That is just going to really lengthen the life of the fish in your refrigerator, just to keep it that like extra bit of cold. But in a way, that's why I kind of prefer just freezing it, because I just know then at that point that there's no risk that it's going to go bad. It defrosts very easily overnight, and we'll be good to go. So I have my bowl of ice. I'm not going to add any water to my ice right now because what I'm going to do is strain my potatoes, and I'm going to add my hot potatoes right on top of the ice, and then I'll add some water to it. Again, it's very warm here, which also means the water coming out of my tap is not especially cold. So I find that in this type of scenario, it's a little bit easier to just leave my ice whole for right now. And I'm gonna get the fish out and show you guys. So what I have here is flounder. So it's a pretty big piece of white fish. It actually weighs exactly 1 pound, just a little over 1 pound. So that makes it really easy for me to know that I can portion it into these 4-ounce portions, that my one piece of fish, I should be able to divide pretty evenly in 4. I am going to show you guys one little trick when it comes to cutting it that hopefully you can kind of see here, that like it's a lot thicker on this side than it is at the tail end here. So because our goal is to have all 4 pieces of fish cooked at the exact same time, I'm going to show you guys a trick to make that tail piece as thick as the thickest piece. So this is where you're getting some real chefy intel. All right, I've got my wine. I have my lemon slices. Let me make sure I have everything for my packet here. Oh yes, greens. I knew there was something else we needed to talk about. Okay, so for those of you who have been here before, I love to talk about my CSA, where I get all of my greens from. River Queen Greens is who I pick up on Saturdays from. And they gave me this like great bag this week of they called it like Asian stir fry greens. So it looks like we've got some red mustard greens here, some baby collard greens. This might be like a Napa cabbage or some sort of like bok choy cousin. So because I have these very hearty greens in comparison to spinach, I have cut them into a chiffonade, very much like how I cut my parsley. So I went ahead and cut half of it. So I'm going to show you guys how I will cut the other half. Here in a second.
Do you think if we were using any heartier green than that baby spinach, like if we're using kale or anything that's not baby spinach, we should probably cut it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would chiffonade it. Now on here, it does say greens. Doesn't it say? Oh, it says chopped. So I think the best way to look at it is like I was a bit more thoughtful in my cutting, that it was very thin strips. I also am going to be feeding this to my children tonight. So as much of a dark leafy green family as we are, I have found that when it comes to my kids, if I cut it really small, they are 100 times more willing to eat it, because it kind of disappears into the dish. But I've even started doing that with like our raw green salads, is that I will chiffonade the salad greens, and I think it's just easier for them to chew and eat. So that's my new parent hack, is chiffonading all the greens that I can. So yeah, so that's what I recommend. I just really think this is going to help it cook all the way through, and not be even a little toothsome, you know.
Plus, it looks really pretty, and I think this dish, that's one of the highlights of it, is that it looks very appealing and it's very impressive when it's all finished, as you guys will see shortly. So I think I love the idea of taking that little extra attention and doing the nice, knife cut with the chiffonade.
Yeah, definitely. And I also, one thing I really do love about like using these this like mix of greens is that I have like purple, I have like a paler green, I have a darker green. So if that's something you're interested in doing, you could also just use like a very traditional salad mix, like the big clamshell you get at the grocery store. Just like spinach, it's just going to cook down in the exact same way. It's going to give you like a little bit more colorful, and certainly those are more tender greens than what I would consider like dark leafy greens, like these are. Okay, so I'll show you guys. I've got my icy water here. Okay, so I can tell already like my potatoes are not hot, and so I'm gonna strain this right now. If you leave it sitting in that ice water, eventually the potatoes start to soak in. They start soaking in that water, and we're really not looking to water down our potatoes. So I'm gonna leave it in the strainer, but in a bowl. You can kind of see that, so that the water will start to drip off, whatever remaining water, so that we don't dilute that delicious compound butter that we made. I'm going to do the same trick again with the chiffonade. So I'm just layering my greens here. Now I will point out that these ones have like a pretty hardy stem. So I'm actually going to stop before that because I don't trust that they're going to cook in time, as the leaves were. So I'm just gonna give up on that. I'm just gonna compost it. I'm not gonna feel guilty about the fact that we did not eat those stems. I could save them for my smoothie, but this purple one I really think is like a mustard green, and I don't think nobody wants that in their smoothie. I put crazy stuff in my smoothie. I do not put mustard greens in my smoothies. That would be pushing it for me. But it is going to bring this sweet, like peppery flavor to our fish. So also consider arugula. That is another fairly tender green comparable to spinach and the mesclun mix that you could use instead of something like kale or collards or mustard greens. Okay, let's portion the fish. All right, so I got my fish here. And I'm gonna put it on my cutting board. So if you think about the fact that I know this is a pound, and if I just cut it in fours, but remember that this side of it, which I think you guys can see on that, is like a lot thicker. So I want to make sure that my skinnier pieces are a little bit bigger. I do feel like very confident that a 4-finger portion is about 4 ounces. So I'm going to make those first two. I'm going to make that first cut. I'm going to put it right on top of the fish. to make my second cut. Okay, so these are gonna be my 2 4-ounce portions that, as you can see, are like a little bit thicker. And now I've got this very skinny side. So this one, I'm gonna cut like that. So I got a pretty good thickness there. But this little guy, the trick I'm gonna show you is that I'm gonna cut, I'm gonna make sure you guys can see this good. I'm gonna cut just like a little slit. You see that little slit there? And then I'm gonna just fold it right over. And so see where now it looks pretty flat there. And now it is as thick as my other fish. Did that come through? Yeah. So look at that. So that is the way that I can guarantee that this serving is not going to be overcooked in comparison to the rest of the pieces of fish I have. And just pretend like that one isn't really big. There's one that's a little big. Okay, let me wipe off my cutting board, and it is going to be time to start putting the fish in the paper. All right, so we get a humongous box of parchment paper at Goldring, and I am sorry to say that it is way better than what you guys can get at home. It just is, for numerous reasons. For starters, it fits exactly a cookie tray perfectly, and it doesn't do like the curling up that I feel like when it comes out of the wrapping one. So one way that you can avoid that is that you can sandwich your paper between 2 boards, or I'm sorry, 2 trays while you're getting all of your food ready. It's going to help your parchment paper lay flat. Okay, so my paper is right now the exact size of a sheet tray. I'm gonna fold it in half. I have to be honest, Heather, I did not watch the video that you linked onto the recipe. I intended to, but I didn't.
It actually isn't a video. It's a just a picture tutorial.
Oh, okay.
Just to help guide for people who have never done this before, but I am confident, and you might do it slightly differently. And that's also, I think, one of the things about this kind of idea is that there can be some different variations. You know, yes, this is a technique and you want to try to do it, you know, a certain way, but I think there can be always a little variation. So we'll see if you do it exactly the way the pictures say.
They did, yeah. I think, well, I know one thing is already different is that that one has you kind of cutting it into like a heart shape, and I'm just going to leave mine in this book form, I guess, for lack of a better.
Yeah, I did the heart shape when I did it, but that's just because I've only ever done it that way. So I'm interested to see you do it this way. Save a step, don't cut it, and now you know, let's see. Next time I'll do it your way.
All right. So I am going to measure that 1/4 teaspoon of salt into here so that I can just sprinkle, but know that I'm only using that much salt. I've got my black pepper ready. So this is when we talk about mise en place. This is like, I think, the best example of that. You want it to be like an assembly line. So I've got my salt, my pepper. I have my lemon sliced already. I've got my greens. I've got my potatoes. Oh, let me get my butter. And you'll see, like, the butter didn't necessarily firm up so much, but it's not as loosey-goosey as it was. All right, and I have my potatoes here. So, and then right behind me are the trays that I'm going to use to bake on, which actually. I will put those right here. Okay, so I'm going to just do 2 at a time because I'm a little cramped for space right now, but most likely if I would probably have done all 4 at once, but I think 2 at a time is totally fine. So I've got my book open, and ultimately I am shooting to start here at the the crease is the word I'm looking for. And I'm gonna kind of make like a rainbow shape. That's where I'm gonna try to keep all of my ingredients mostly. So what are we starting with here? Potatoes, we're gonna put those down first. So I'm gonna get about half of my potatoes out of here. And I'm just gonna put those again, like starting at the crease here and just making a little U shape. And I may have cooked a few more potatoes than I actually needed. So I think that looks pretty good for the potatoes. And then we're gonna put our fish on top, or is it our greens next? Help me out here, Heather. Do you have the recipe up?
It's greens. I have it. Let me,
Okay.
I have it.
Here, it's okay. I have the recipe. Let me just look real quick to, I mean, honestly, the truth is like, it's not, you shouldn't worry as much about it either. So I'm not even going to look at the recipe. I don't think it
Greens,
matters.
then fish, then your butter, your lemon, and your wine sprinkle.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, so I think a good way maybe that it's fairly important. You definitely want your potatoes to be on the bottom because they're going to give some structure to your paper. By putting the greens in between the potatoes and the fish, I think it'll also help kind of cook those with some juices. I'm going to put my fish right on top. I'm going to sprinkle with my salt. So this is the other perk of me putting the salt in that little jar, is that I don't have to worry about my hands that have now touched fish, like worry about them getting in all of my salt is the word I'm looking for.
The salt.
Thank you, salt. Right, some black pepper here.
I like that this looks like a little nest that you've created for the fish to
Right?
live on.
It does look like a little happy place to live. I'm gonna try to scoop these back a little bit. Is that no? There we go. That's a good view of it. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of visually make like an X in my butter, and so that I can just like kind of scoop up I'm just gonna plop it right on top there. And like, I'm gonna spread it a little bit, but I'm not gonna go crazy because it will melt and move. I have my lemon slices. I cut a little bit extra, so I'm actually gonna put 2 lemon slices on top of my fish. And then I have my wine. So I was smart enough to portion out my wine just in case I drank it all while I was working with you guys, but I didn't. I haven't. Let me just make sure that wine still tastes okay. It tastes great. Okay, so now it's only a tablespoon. So I'm actually going to measure that. I think it's just going to make my life a little bit easier to have a little more control with it in this spoon. So I'm just going to drizzle it right on top. And luckily, like the fish is going to absorb some of it. The greens, it's not going to just run off out of your paper. So don't fret. Okay, now let me try to give you guys the best view of my folding. So if you've ever made an empanada, very similar situation. If you've ever eaten an empanada and you just want to think about what the crust looks like. So I'm going to fold my paper over in half, and I'm going to start twisting. So I'm going to fold one triangle, and then I'm going to fold and continue folding on top of itself. Now, you want to make sure that you're leaving some room for the steam to actually cook our fish. And otherwise, your goal is just to make a tight seal because you want the steam to stay in your parchment paper and so that it can cook your fish. And then I kind of just give it like an extra little smush. And if I feel like I have like a corner that might need some extra love, but I think that looks pretty good. And I'm now just going to move it right onto my tray. And then I will repeat with this one. So I'm going to fold my paper all the way over. I start with one triangle, and then the rest is just kind of a free-for-all. Again, I think as long as you maintain the two goals, which is a tight seal and leaving enough space for steam to kind of move around in your parchment paper, then you have achieved all that you need to for this dish. It's kind of like when you wrap like that awkward Christmas or birthday gift and you're like, I'm just gonna fold it and slap a piece of tape on it. Okay. Voila. And then I'm just gonna do it 2 more times. I'm not gonna do it as slow this time though, because I can only demo that slow one time a class, folks. But I want to get to our shrimp also.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I have to say, my comment is in watching you do the folding, it's the exact same way I did the folding with the heart shape, but you really just cut out that step of making the heart shape. I think the heart shape is really just to like help make it so that it's like less awkward, but I gotta say, it's still a little awkward. So why might as well save yourself the trouble and just do what Katie did and don't cut it and just go round and round and round.
Yep, I agree. Because really, again, like simplicity is always what we're looking for with this. Like we shouldn't be stressing out for things to be perfect and like, you know, especially in a situation like this where like it all just cooks together. So like, you know, it's once you cut it open, people, I feel like both you and your family are like so impressed with the whole thing. Nobody pays attention to what the paper wrapping is looking like. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pop this one in because why not? All right, I've got my lemons. Oh, I forgot about the salt for that one. Okay. But no big deal because I can just put it right on top of my butter because again, I know that it's going to all end up in the same place. These 2 are going to be for the kids, so I am going to put a little bit less black pepper in there for them, and I will just put only 1 slice, and then, but they still get the wine. The alcohol will cook off of our wine, so as far as, you know, my kids, I'm not worried about them getting a tablespoon of wine with their dinner. And then this way, hopefully, my demo will actually show you how fast and easy it is to do this. I just really like, after a few folding, I try to like go back and like just kind of smush it down. I think that that's the only real trick because mainly, really, we don't want to lose any of that butter because we haven't gotten a lot from the get-go. And so there would be nothing sadder than some of that butter leaking out. How are my friends that are cooking at home doing? Am I at a good pace? Are they keeping up?
I see Lena's in her kitchen. She looks very active and busy.
Okay. Oh, wait, unmute yourself, Lena. Oh, there you go.
Oh, she's got it.
Awesome.
Not staying sealed though.
Oh, are you having a hard time getting the seal tight?
Yeah.
Kind of twist it under, like you would be like rolling up like a yoga mat.
Okay.
And then just kind of press.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be like airtight. I mean, like don't, you know, as long as you don't think there's any holes that like any of the butter or like a big burst of steam is going to come out, then I mean, they look pretty good from my vantage point in that 4x4 square.
Two trays though, right? To put them.
Yes,
separate.
I did do 2 trays because you want air to be able to circulate around them.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so I'm putting my next one in. And I will set a timer because otherwise I will probably forget. We'll say 12 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to start with 10 so that I can rotate. I love to rotate. Top from bottom and twist. I feel like we all have some idea of how lopsided our ovens cook. And so depending, I feel like as long as we're like in tune with your oven, if you know your top or bottom is hotter, the right corner, left corner kind of thing. But rotating is always a good rule of thumb. Okay, so this next one is pretty wham bam fast. So I'm just going to put everything in this one pot right here. So I know often people ask me about vinegar, and I always say I only use white vinegar to clean. Well, I'm going to use white vinegar to pickle this shrimp because there are so many flavors going into this. Now, I did put apple cider on there because I feel like, I don't know, people don't always have both. I don't know. Red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, all too expensive for this type of recipe. So that's why I really just stick with the apple cider and the white vinegar, because I'm going to make, 3 cups of liquid, and ultimately after it flavors my shrimp, I'm just going to throw it away. And so I would not recommend using something expensive for a liquid you're going to throw away. Okay, I got my 2 bay leaves. I've got my garlic. I am just going to smash this one. I'm like, Heather, I need to get a volunteer that will come and just do my dishes here at the house. Like, is there anybody? Maybe I'll get in touch with that woman, Ashley, and tell her if she really wants to volunteer for Gold Ring, she can come to my house and clean up the dishes afterwards. It'd be awesome. Okay, I'm just going to give a smash to both of these. The smash makes that paper come off really easy. In it goes.
Steph, we have a question about the spices. Yeah. So Lisa, who's cooking along with us, says she doesn't have all the spices. How can she fake it?
Okay. Oh, I love faking it. Let me tell you.
I knew you would like
all
that.
Right. Yes, I do so much. So you could use a celery stalk instead of celery seeds. That would give you that celery flavor. You also could really go for like the inside of the celery, right? That has like the really little tender stalks and tends to have a lot more leaves on it. So you could, if you want to, kind of peel back the better, crunchier stalks and start with the center. If you have powdered mustard, could recommend that. I've never just tried putting yellow mustard into a poaching liquid like this, but I have to say, I don't think it would be the end of the world. Yellow mustard in our fridge has vinegar, it has salt, it obviously has mustard seeds. So you could maybe scale back your salt a little bit if you wanted to, if you were just going to use like yellow mustard or Dijon mustard that you have in your refrigerator, or Creole mustard if you're here in New Orleans. Let's see, red pepper flakes, you could use some cayenne, you could use some just ground black pepper. I mean, we're just adding like a little background heat. Like these shrimp don't come out spicy, but that little bit of pepper gives it a little bit of heat. Allspice, I mean, you could use star anise if you have that. Ultimately, you probably could just get away with not having the allspice in. I think, but those are probably the trickiest of all of my ingredients. So hopefully that answers the question. But I love a good hack.
I think that was pretty good. Lisa had also asked earlier, and I didn't see it right away because I got an urgent email from a student. Sorry. She wants to know about the difference between using parchment and foil for the fish recipe.
Yeah, so I have some real personal thoughts about foil. I think we've all heard that foil has been known to cause Alzheimer's. That aluminum foil, I personally don't love like baking with aluminum foil. I know that there's moments like I did foil with the beets. We needed foil with the um, lasagna. But remember, I put a piece of parchment on my lasagna first. I didn't let the foil touch my lasagna. And then the beets, ultimately, we would be taking off that exterior layer. So in a pinch, you could use foil. It just would not be, it just wouldn't be my number one choice. At that point, I would almost recommend just using a casserole dish and putting a mound, like you're a 9 by 13 or whatever you have that has a lid, and just make your individual portions, your little stack of potatoes and your fish and your butter, and just pop a lid on it and bake it in the oven. That it would be cheaper
Yeah.
even to do that. I don't use wax paper a lot, but I know people bake cookies on wax paper, so maybe I don't know.
I don't know
Don't
about
quote
that.
me on the wax paper. No. So yeah, I
Okay.
personally would probably go for like a casserole dish.
I like that idea of doing it just in one big pan and then with the lid, and then it still makes a really nice presentation if you were serving, people. All right,
Yeah.
back to shrimp.
Okay.
I'm excited for this. So I have to admit, I'm not from the South. I mean, technically I'm sort of from the South, but I'm from Maryland, which is it's not really the South at all. But anyway, I had never heard of this idea of pickled shrimp. When Katie said she was going to make pickled shrimp, I thought, oh, well, that sounds interesting. But then I looked into it and I was like, oh, this actually sounds super delicious. And why would I not want to have this? And I know it is kind of a Southern thing. And I will say, from my internet research, people have all kinds of different ways that they do this. And there were some methods where people were cooking it for a really long time. And I thought that's weird because the shrimp would get so chewy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would just like to say, I think this sounds like such a cool and different way to eat shrimp that I was not used to, where you can really just like infuse it with some extra punchy kind of a flavor so that you can do so many different things with it.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. So I will say, I mean, like, obviously I learned about this technique, like working at restaurants. So we would do a pickled shrimp appetizer. I think it came with like grapefruit segments and some black olives, and then like a fancy mayonnaise and like, micro greens on top, or sprouts or something. But I will say it's a technique I use at home because it makes my shrimp last longer. So it really is more of like a poaching method. So just like we boil crawfish or boil shrimp or crabs, it's the same idea. It's just that instead of using only water and seasoning, I've added that vinegar aspect to it. But mainly I use it because it lengthens the life of my shrimp. So it cooks it quickly in one pot. It gives it a flavor, but it's not such a strong flavor that you are cornered into only eating it this one way, right? So you could eat it with cocktail sauce. You can throw it on a salad. You can stuff it in a sandwich. Like it just, it cooks it, it adds some flavor. And really, again, it's like a really healthy way of cooking it. So Heather did allow me a half a tablespoon of salt, which I have not added yet to this. So I'm going to do that now. And mainly that's because we know that all of that salt does not actually end up in the shrimp. So it's seasoned, but it's not exactly salty. So what I'm going to do, I've got all that stuff in there. I'm sure most of you noticed I didn't really measure anything with the exception of my salt. I did have that 4 of those scoops is a half a tablespoon from my salt scooper. But what I really want to show you guys too is how to peel and devein shrimp. So I'm going to let this boil. Once it comes up to a boil, I'm just going to turn it down to a simmer. I'm going to let it hang out. That's going to allow a lot of those flavors to infuse, into the bath, the water bath. And so I'm going to be able to peel my shrimp while that's happening. So you'll see I have, again, my neuroses from restaurants. Oh, excuse me, is to have all my stuff set up. So I have 2 metal bowls. I have the container that my shrimp is in. I have a little paring knife so that I can devein. So this way I can put my scraps in one, I can put my peeled shrimp in another, and then ultimately I'll use this plastic container to put the vein from the shrimp. So I want to make sure you guys can, there it is. All right, so here's the head. Maybe, is it better over here? I think I'm going to do it like this. Okay, here's the head. So I'm just going to use my 2 fingers to pull the head off. And that's going to go in one bowl. I'm now going to use 2 fingers. So in here are like the little feet. I'm going to use 2 fingers and it's going to peel off half of the shell of the shrimp. And then my 2 fingers are just going to peel off that second half. So here is my peeled shrimp. So that's going to go in a bowl. All right, that's my 10 minutes for the fish. So I'm just going to rotate them. I'm just going to turn them because the top ones went in first. The bottom ones were for the kids. It's a little bit smaller fish. So I'm just going to leave them on the racks they're in, but I just rotated the pan. All right, so now I'm just going to do this quickly. And then for my last 2, I will show you in a slower fashion. Actually, let me do this. Hopefully you guys can see. Is this a good view of seeing the peeling of the shrimp?
Yeah, I can see. I know you showed that one.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll do one close up, but again, it's like heads off, and then you just like twist the rest of the exoskeleton off. I am leaving the tails on because it's fun to eat shrimp and hold on to that tail, but mainly because the skeleton has, which is basically what the tail is. It's still part of the exoskeleton, has flavor. Just like chicken bones have flavor. So I don't want to get rid of every bit of it. I'm just going to get rid of most of it so that it's easier to eat. If you really wanted to, sure, you can take the tails off and then you don't have to worry about them at the end. But I personally, I leave my tails on. Now, if you are feeling really into it, you can save your shrimp shells and make shrimp stock. Which is what I did. To be honest, that's what I did with my shrimp cells because we've been, I had to test the recipe. So we've been eating some pickled shrimp for this past week. So to make shrimp stock, what I do is I saute, like I put a little bit of oil in a pot. I saute my shrimp shells. They turn from this white, opaque color to this bright, hot pink. I throw about a tablespoon or 2, so, an ice cube or 2 of tomato paste into that hot pot. And then you want to cook that tomato paste a little bit. So I mix it up with the shells and let it, cook so that you don't just have this kind of raw canned tomato flavor. I have my Ziploc bag of Treasure in my freezer. So I threw a handful of that onion, celery, carrot mixture that I always have in my freezer, covered it with water, and I cooked it for about an hour. You really don't have to cook shrimp stock very long. Like that flavor imparts very quickly. And then I strained it and I refrigerated it, and now it's in my freezer. I only made about 2 quarts. I feel like shrimp stock also a little goes a long way.
Yeah, Jeff,
but it's nice to have that.
we have a quick
Mhm.
question. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Lisa wants to know how much longer in the oven for the fish after the 10 minutes? How do we know when it's done? And I know this is kind
Done,
of
right.
inside the paper, so we can't really like see it that well.
Yes, it's true. So I think the great thing about a 4-ounce piece of fish is that after 12 minutes in the oven, like it's just almost impossible that it's not going to be cooked all the way through. Because we're steaming it, we also have a little bit more flexibility of that if it's, you know, a little more on the overcooked side, it's still going to be very tender, very flaky, kind of thing. So one, I think you just have to have faith. But if you're not that type of person, you can always make an extra one than how many you need so that you know you can open one and test it and then know that everybody else can open the rest of them, you know, for that kind of ceremonious moment, which I'll do. So I just set my timer for 2 more minutes. And actually, Lisa, I can't thank you enough because I didn't set my timer. And had you not asked your question, I may have forgotten that they were in there because I was really in the shrimp mode here for a minute.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
you know what, Katie, too, when I did mine last week, I used cod from work that was really thick, and I had to cook it longer.
Longer.
I had 2 pieces. One was a little thicker, one was a little thinner. I ate the thinner one and then just set the other one aside. And I knew that it would kind of like carry over a little bit more. I sort of like wrapped it back up. And I ate that one later, but I do think you have to be mindful of the thickness of the fish fillets. That's really at the end of the day what's going to determine, don't you think?
Yes, it is, but I still also think that the 4-ounce part is it's kind of big, is important as well. So I, you know, because I had bought a lot of fish, I have a scale at home. I was able to weigh that one piece of fish and see that, yes, it was exactly just a tad over 1 pound. If you're buying fish from the grocery store and you tell them, I want 1 pound of fish, clearly, you know, you're getting a pound of fish. You can also ask that fish guy to cut it into 4-ounce pieces for you. Because in the same way that like it's second nature to me, like I assure you that the people working at the fish counter can cut those 4 ounces without a thought. So I, you know, don't feel bad about asking them to just cut it into the 4 ounces for you. And so in that sense, I think even if it was really thick, it would be a much smaller piece, and I still think it would cook in time. Plus, there's carryover cooking. So you can always kind of count on a fair amount of, so here is our product, a fair amount of that. Now you also can kind of touch it and feel if it feels like firm. Yeah, I think these are good. And like I said, they're still gonna sit for a minute. Back there. Okay, I'm gonna do these last 2 shrimp just to show you guys again. So I'm gonna pop that head off, and then it's we've got here the little feet part. So I just have 2 fingers that slide off the first half of it, the second half of it, and then you're left with that little shrimp. I used to have to peel like 25 pounds of shrimp, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week. And I will say, I always loved it. There's something really satisfying about peeling shrimp. Like crabs, I get so frustrated trying to peel like cooked crabs. I cannot do it. Luckily, I have friends that love me that are willing to, if we're out eating crabs together, my friend Jessie is always so kind to like crack and do, Heather, do you do crabs well because of Maryland?
I'm a professional at crabs. Yes, of course. I'm not fast at it though, because I grew up learning to be very meticulous, and my parents were very clear, you better get all that meat out of that crab. Do not waste any of that precious crab meat. So I take my time and I really like do a good job.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay,
You
so
know what's
now
funny? You were saying about the shrimp. I wish you would come show our med students, because the med students, they're like, they do not want to peel and devein the shrimp.
yeah. I definitely, when we used to do in-person classes, I would always find my way over to that sink because, again, I just kind of miss. There's something about the really like repetitiveness of it, and again, like the satisfaction of like when you peel that perfect shell. But we also used to race, so it was like this insane competition between me as like usually the only woman in the kitchen and a bunch of like 18-year-old boys. And so there's nothing better than schooling them on how fast I can peel shrimp. Okay, now it's time to devein. I'm trying to find a good one because these shrimp were actually really clean, that I didn't have a ton of veins. But okay, so I've got my shrimp. I have my little paring knife. I'm just gonna very gently drag it down the very back of the shrimp, and then you get a little peek inside, and you can see that little dark vein. And I use my knife to pick it up and then drag it out. I gotta cut a little bit more for that one. And then there it is. That's your like, it's just sand. All right. So don't be too grossed out about it. You know, most of the time that's really all that it is. That's where shrimp hang out, is at the bottom of the ocean. So that's really what they're eating. And it makes it gritty. It's also kind of ugly when you know, and I'm sorry, I'm actually putting.
Yeah, I will say I have eaten tons of shrimp vein in my lifetime and never a bad thing has happened to me. So it's not that it's gonna, make you sick or anything. It just doesn't look good. I agree. It can be real gritty.
Yep. And really the bigger the shrimp, the bigger the vein. And so you definitely really want to get it out then. Usually really small shrimp, sometimes it's kind of non-existent. And like even on this one, like there isn't even anything in it. So I don't know if it has to do with the season of that. Certain times of year, there's like more, sand and dirt in there. But I also will say, so my husband and I happen to be out in Westwego, which is the West Bank of New Orleans, and there is this amazing fish market there that I had never seen before in my life, mainly because I'm not always out in Westwego very often. And it really reminded me of Jazz Fest, except for instead of food booths, it was all seafood. So like everybody was selling crabs, they were selling shrimp, and like big fat shrimp too. So that's the shrimp my family and I have been eating this week. I had already bought this at the farmer's market for twice the amount. So I think I paid $6.99 a pound, and I would call these shrimps, I would call them 1620s for sure, which means there are 16 to 20 shrimp in a pound. And the shrimp in Westwego were more like 8/10s, which means, there's 8 shrimp in a pound, which is big. Those big boys. And they were only $3.99 a pound. So I have to say, I think I'm going to be finding myself going to Westwego a little more often to pick up our seafood. They had frog legs, they had alligator. But literally at the end of this like gravel parking lot were boats, were like shrimp boats. Like it was obvious that these folks had like just come off of the water with their haul and were selling us, shrimp like right out of the water. It was pretty cool. I was pretty excited about it.
I'm gonna put the link in the chat that you sent me the other day about it for any of our local friends who might want to check it out. So this is actually a Google Maps link, but it'll show you where it is and what it looks like. I've driven by it before and thought to myself, I didn't really fully know what it was.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna definitely have to check that out.
Yes. I feel like Louisiana, and maybe I just have lived here too long that I give Louisiana a lot of credit, but like I feel like there are so many times that I'm like, what is that? And I just pull over and it's like the most horrifying thing I've ever seen, or the like most amazing, like best kept secret of, you know, food or seafood or I don't know. I feel like Louisiana just never ceases to amaze me. I think that's all there is to it. Okay, I'm gonna move. That wasn't hot because I did just pick it right up. I'm gonna move my pot over here. So it was simmering, and now I want it like back at a boil. I'm literally gonna bring it to. I'm gonna turn my oven off because I forgot to do that. I'm gonna bring it to a boil, and I'm gonna dump my shrimp right in. I'm gonna turn my heat off. I'm gonna set my timer for 2 minutes. Done. I have a tray here to put my shrimp on because I want to be able to put it right in my refrigerator to start cooling down. Now, you wouldn't want to use an ice bath like I did with the potatoes because all of those flavors that we just put in there are going to go away. I'm going to just use a spoon, a slotted spoon to scoop my shrimp out. If there is a mustard seed on it or a little red pepper flake, I'm really not going to worry about that. Those are all delicious and edible, you know, so it's not a big deal. And then obviously the bigger things like the bay leaf and the shrimp, or I'm sorry, the garlic is just going to stay in the thing. So now we just wait for it to boil. Let's actually, while we do that, let's cut open one of our papillotes here. Shall we?
Yes.
Okay. So I really prefer to use scissors. I think it gives like the best effect. And like this is literally how you can serve it at the dinner table, right? You just like put it right on a plate. I'm just gonna do a little pinch. Okay, maybe it's me now, huh? Okay, I'm gonna do a little pinch here so that I can cut. Way.
Oh, I like that technique with the little V shape.
Little X. Yep. And then you can like, you know, eat it right out of this. Is what I would do. That's what we're gonna do for dinner tonight.
Katie, will you
and
pick
then
it
certainly
right up and hold it a little close?
Oh, yeah.
Pick it up so we could. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that looks so good.
When you push into it, for if it just pops right apart like that, you definitely know that it is nice and cooked. All right, I'm gonna plop my shrimp in. I'm gonna just give it one little stir. You can see they're like already turning pink. Timer is set for 2 minutes.
That fish looks so good. And I know it's gonna be so light and like so full of flavor, but so light and springtime.
Yeah, and can you see like you can still see like the purple of the greens here, and like the butter really did just melt like right on top of the fish, which means that it just went all the way like into the fish.
Oh yeah. Paulette says she can't wait to make it.
Yeah, so I did set my timer for 2 minutes, but I will say like looking at my shrimp, I don't think they're gonna need 2 minutes. So just, you know, keep that in mind. Like use your instincts that if like it's starting to look already, you know, really pink, then you can just go ahead and pull them out. I also like touch it. I'm just gonna give it 30 more seconds. I've got my tray right here so that I can scoop them out of the water, and then we'll pop them in the refrigerator. Even if you want to eat them kind of warm, I would recommend popping them in the fridge. I feel like hot pickled shrimp is not as good as warm or cold. And I guess maybe that I should say that's like the other thing I really love about cooking them in advance like this and then being able to leave it in my refrigerator is that they're good cold. You know, because it doesn't have like fat, it doesn't have like congealed, you know, oil or butter on it that maybe I would have cooked it in a pan, and it doesn't have like, you know, kind of dried, I don't know, Creole seasoning or something like that that isn't necessarily good cold. And especially, I mean, like, this is it. Our spring is almost over, so I love recommending things that are good cold.
I mean, it's essentially, this is like basically like you're poaching it in a very flavorful liquid that has acid, you know, and lots of seasoning. Yum.
Yep.
Chef, we have one request. If you
Okay.
possibly pretty please cut open one more fish packet because we did not see it.
Yeah, let's do
Can
it.
you do one more?
I will totally do one more
Okay.
for sure.
I really like the way the zigzag cut you did.
Oh yeah. Okay. So on the plate it goes that I would want to serve it in, and then let me see if I can do a little trick here. Try to get it a little bit closer to you guys. Is that better?
Yeah, that looks good.
For the view. All right. So I just pinched a little bit here on the front, so to make a little slit, and then I can put my scissors in. Voila.
Voila.
Yeah, it looks great. I'm excited about eating it tonight, honestly.
It
I
looks
also
really
have
good.
missed the impapio. Yeah, it's yummy. You know, quality control. You always got to taste it first. And this is another dish too. I would, much like the shrimp, it's not like cold, but it doesn't have to be piping hot, right? So like it doesn't lose quality by sitting on your table for a few minutes waiting for it to get there. And again, when it feels really hot outside, you don't feel like you're eating this really hot dish, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, all
I
right.
love it. I guess that's it, right?
I think that's it. I know, right?
All right.
I mean, I was hoping to get it done in an hour, but an hour and a half will just have to suffice.
All right, I'm gonna go back to our view where we can see everybody for the end of our video here. I think we might have lost our people who were cooking along because they were hungry. They made their fish and they wanted to go. So so I hope they enjoyed it. For those of you that didn't cook along, I hope you'll now consider making these dishes.
Definitely.
And then I did also just want to let everybody know we do have another class scheduled. It's live on Eventbrite. We're doing seafood again, and we're gonna do another sort of elegant type of a preparation. Chef Katie's gonna be showing some seared scallops, and she's gonna do a risotto. So these are things that we were talking about, you know. Oftentimes people love ordering these things out at restaurants, but they think like, oh, it's too hard to make at home, or it's too rich, it's too much. It's not. Katie is going to show you how easy you can do these things at home, really impress your family, friends, etc. I think you'll really enjoy it. So definitely think about signing up for that one. As I said, it's live on Eventbrite. I'll link it in the video email. And it's so great to see all of you, and we hope you have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.